And we are back. We are heading into week 13, I believe. Is this week 13? They all kind of blend together. Does that sound
Yes, it
right?
is. Yep, week 13.
Incredible. 13 weeks of football. Who would have thought we made it? Many players didn't make it. I mean, given the state of the NFL right now, the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game almost didn't make it to week 13. Made it, I don't know, it feels like it's closer to week 14 than anything. But do we not have a Thursday night game this week?
Yeah, I don't think we do. So that's going to be interesting. But we had a Wednesday game to make up for it, I guess.
Yeah, you could definitely call that a game by a stretch of the imagination. What a show, man. What a show that was. We are into week 13. Thank God. Let's leave last week behind. This ended on a pretty gruesome note of the Pittsburgh game. We lost RG3 in that game. Marquise Brown came back to life. That's cool. Didn't happen on the main slate, so, my Sklansky Bucks are worth nothing anyways. First game we have on our schedule. It's Miami versus the Bengals. This is honestly one of the least interesting games I have. I'm totally fine with like a Devontae Parker as a one-off, especially if Fitzpatrick plays, but I think there are some signs that Tua might play. I mean, other than that, this is, I think, the lowest total of the main slate. I'm scrolling. I'm not seeing anything. I'm all for getting scrappy and going down to a game with a 47, 46 total, thinking, oh, well, the guys are cheap. They're going to be low owned. If the game hits if it just hits the over to the tune of 52, 53 points, the players pay off their salary. And that's what's important, is finding, getting like max points per dollar out of your, salary cap. You can do that by targeting some less desirable games and then just stacking up, some one-off studs from other games. This game doesn't have any appeal. It's so low that I just cannot see this game hitting some sort of massive scoring potential, mostly on the shoulders of Brandon Allen.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this game at all. If Tua does not play, of course, it's going to open up some Fitz magic there. Some Devontae Parker. If Tua plays, I'm honestly not even interested in the game as a whole. I'm not interested really in Devontae Parker. 6,400. I liked him better last week, and he was like 5,900. So yeah, if Tua does play, I will have literally probably nothing from this game at all. So nothing really sticks out. Just basically because on the Cincinnati side, like it is so ugly that I just think this game in general is going to be so ugly, so low scoring. The Dolphins defense is priced up to like 4,400, which if you told me that at the beginning of the year, I would have called you crazy there. But yeah, it's a stay away game from all aspects of it, really.
Yep, completely agree. Let's get into this game. Is an interesting game. We have Minnesota as 10.5-point favorites. A 52.5-point total. You kidding me? It's crazy in a game with Jacksonville in it. And on the other side, like Jacksonville, for the crap I give him, at least has an awesome running back in James Robinson, who, despite going into Cleveland again, like every spot, he's like an underdog. His team doesn't have a high implied team total, and it just doesn't matter. James Robinson just puts in that work. I believe if he hasn't, he is certainly on pace to set the record for yards from scrimmage from a UDFA rookie, and he's on pace to set it within the next week or two. It's kind of pretty much locked up for him that he'll be one of the best undrafted players in his rookie season ever. Outside of that, the rest of Jacksonville, I mean, you could, if he plays, I think he logged a limited practice day. DJ Chark is always interesting. The chalk in this game is going to come on the other side of the ball. Dalvin Cook, I know he didn't hit last week, but I think the DFS field is sharp enough to simply recognize that, 10.5-point home favorite versus Jacksonville Dalvin Cook. You go back to it off of one bust. On the passing side of the game, if Irv Smith doesn't play, I mean, you can go back to Kyle Rudolph. I think Justin Jefferson, given the volume he's seeing, given that I believe in his 8 now starts, I think it is, he's had 4 100-yard games. I like that. The player I like the most is actually Adam Thielen. He was activated off the COVID list. No reason to believe he doesn't play. So I think he will end up being the most, or the least owned, of all of the obvious plays on this team. And for that reason, I'm going to go to him. I think the difference between him and Justin Jefferson is small. I actually like Justin Jefferson more, and he's a few hundred cheaper on DraftKings. So I think it's between 72 and 69, or maybe 68 and 71. 300, sure. You could use that for something. I don't care all that much. I know that I'm going to get a 5 to 10% ownership discount going from Justin Jefferson to Adam Thielen, and Adam Thielen has been an absolute red zone fiend. If he scores twice in the red zone this week, those are 2 scores that Dalvin Cook, that Justin Jefferson, that if he ends up being chalk, Kyle Rudolph, all don't get. So I think he's my favorite play. I think all of them make sense just from a raw value perspective. But in tournaments, I'm looking to leverage the chalk, and I think he is, as always, the best way to do it. People want to get to that new shiny toy of the first round, Justin Jefferson, and he's really good. I'm not disrespecting him in that way. It's simply that if I think he projects similarly to Adam Thielen, why wouldn't I take the guy who's lower owned?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really good point there. And yep, so Thielen is going to be more expensive than Jefferson, which is interesting there. Obviously, Jefferson's going to be the more owned guy. And yeah, very intriguing there because Thielen, he scores touchdowns, 11 touchdowns this year, which is a ton compared to Jefferson, I think has like six or something. So that definitely makes sense to go out of your way and, pay a couple extra hundred more to get Thielen just because of ownership right there. So I like that a lot. Dalvin Cook's really interesting. So he screwed a lot of people, including me last week in cash. I didn't play him in tournaments or anything like that, but in cash he did screw me, and he was like 80% owned in cash as well. I don't know, 9,500. Hearing his coach say that Dalvin Cook is just really beat up. It's not really something I like hearing as for a guy that's 9,500. But if he's like anywhere near to healthy, like I do think he'll be fine here. 9,500. Jacksonville, very good matchup. So I do think I'll probably go there in cash. Tournaments, I do want to go elsewhere, but James Robinson, 7,300. The dude is the man in Jacksonville. They use like basically nobody else. Last week, 22 rushing attempts. He had 5 receptions on 6 targets as well, 29.9 DraftKings points. And I just love the usage that Robinson gets. So at 7,300, I like it a lot. I think there's a lot of upside, 8 touchdowns on the year. The matchup's not bad against Minnesota there. So the only thing I'm concerned about is if Jacksonville does fall behind, but even then, like they're still passing Robinson the ball, so I think it's fine. He's definitely the guy in Jacksonville. Call me crazy, but why am I thinking that maybe a Kirk Cousins stack this week is something to look at here against this Jacksonville defense that's so bad? I love the stacking options, Thielen and Jefferson. Kirk Cousins has been decent as of late, so am I crazy for wanting to do a Kirk Cousins stack this week?
No, Kirk Cousins hasn't even been decent. He's been legit good. Don't be afraid to come on this show and talk a little bit of that good Kirk Cousins. He's, I believe, second in the NFL in like adjusted yards per attempt, top 5 in yards per attempt. Maybe I have them backwards. It kind of, it's a moot point. He's been very efficient. His quarterback rating is top 10. Any way you slice it, he has been an efficient quarterback. And it looks like sort of like that Ryan Tannehill, where the team does sharp things like play action, maybe some pre-snap motion. They have incredible receivers. So when you add all those things in, you put a good quarterback in the system and things work out well. So yeah, I think he is perfectly in play, and he probably correlates better with someone like a James Robinson, where typically you see a running back going off in a game. It's because they're chunking up long plays, or typically staying in bounds, going down. That's all things that can generally slow down the pace and reduce the amount of just overall plays that the opponent gets to run. That's bad for the other running backs. The other running back is trying to do the exact same thing. Quarterbacks, and by extension at least a little bit, their receivers, mostly make their bread on efficiency, especially quarterbacks. We think like, oh, let's target these garbage time quarterbacks. You mostly get to garbage time because you're crap. Like, you're not a good quarterback, and that's how you get to 45, 50 attempts. The good quarterbacks don't need that much. Efficiency at quarterback is how you find big fantasy days. I mean, just ask Patrick Mahomes. He can get it done on one throw on a single drive. So I'm looking for efficient quarterbacks more so than anything, efficient quarterbacks in good game environments. This seems to be, at least based on the total, that Vegas has them as one of the highest implied team totals this slate. I completely agree. I think you are perfectly fine going to a Kirk Cousins stack. I think Cousins, Thielen, Rudolph would probably be the way I would take it, but I also think you're totally fine playing one-offs of, or like a single stack of Jefferson plus Cousins even. I think Thielen is just my overall preferred play. Both are great. They're both great receivers. So I think that's all I have for this game. Let's move on to, I mean, it's not like a bad totaled game. Atlanta versus New Orleans, a 45.5 point total. The game's supposed to be close. It's only a 3-point spread in favor of the Saints. It's simply that the way Taysom Hill plays does not seem conducive to producing big shootouts. He runs the football. He's just another running back, essentially. And they also use Alvin Kamara as, at this point, only a running back, given what Taysom Hill is doing or not doing for Alvin Kamara. And now they're mixing in Latavius Murray. I mean, they are just the ultimate run-first football team with Taysom Hill under center. That's not great for shootouts. And on the other side, I like playing the Falcons, but their implied team total is just okay at 21.25 points. It's a product of the game being at 45.5 points. Neither team projected to score a lot. I'm not ruling out any of these players, but I don't know. Any interest in, like, is there ever going to be an Alvin Kamara bounce back, or do we just jam him in at 30% once Drew Brees comes back?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard and frustrating to want to play Alvin Kamara at this point. I mean, with Taysom Hill, like he's like basically non-existent. 6.2 DraftKings points in Week 12, 10.5 and in Week 11 there. I can't get excited about the Saints offense whatsoever. I think Taysom Hill ruins this offense from a DFS perspective. I don't think he's bad or nothing like that, but it's just hard to get excited about really any play on the Saints offense there. So, and you said it, like, how can you get excited about the Falcons offense when they don't have a good implied team total? It's probably going to be somewhat of a low scoring game. But you see Matt Ryan there sitting at 5,600. I know Matt Ryan is extremely inconsistent. You see it, Julio Jones there at 6,600. It's just so cheap for Julio Jones. So, if anything, I really don't want to stack this game. Maybe a one-off of Julio Jones at 6,600. I think that's really cheap there. Other than that, it's hard to get excited for this game just because of Taysom Hill and what he's doing to the Saints offense there.
Yeah, I agree. The next game we have is the Jets versus. It's the Jets versus the Raiders, and I mean the Raiders are fine. The Jets are terrible, and I'm still more excited to stack this game than I was a matchup of the like an NFC. What is the NFC East? An NFC East matchup of the Falcons and the Saints. That's indoors. It should have. We're used to those games having 52-point totals, and here we come in where I'm telling you a Jets game is more desirable, and I stand by that. We have seen a fairly condensed offense from the Raiders, which means that if their passing game goes off, it is almost certainly Darren Waller. If not, there's a decent chance it's Nelson Aguilar of all players. So I think when I'm targeting a Derek Carr stack, I'm probably just doing a Carr Waller. I think you could double stack with an Aguilar. I know Henry Ruggs got 5 targets last week. I think John Gruden has largely just misused and misunderstood how to use a player like him, so I'm not too keen on that. I think I'd be limiting myself to simply Aguilar, Darren Waller, and that's about it. But they consume all the targets anyway, so that's fine. And then at the running back position, as long as Josh Jacobs is able to play, he's a massive favorite against a terrible Jets defense. There are very obvious plays on the Raiders side. And on the Jets side, I mean, Jamison Crowder seems to have been revealed as this like fake alpha receiver, given that he comes back like with Brashad Perriman back and Denzel Mims back. And it's not like I like Denzel Mims. Brashad Perriman probably got a bad rap early in his career because he played on some bad Baltimore teams, and he probably wasn't that good anyways. He's maybe better than we expect. These aren't great players, and Jamison Crowder just can't beat them out for targets. And even when Sam Darnold comes back, it's still like Denzel Mims, top 10 in air yard share, top 10 in target share. He's not that expensive. He's in that 4K range, I believe. I think if I'm looking to target any of these guys, it's Mims 1, Perriman a pretty distant 2. I think it's viable, but not desirable, I guess is how you'd say it. I don't know. I have no interest in Jamison Crowder, but this game seems ripe for one-offs. I love me some Josh Jacobs plus Denzel Mims, even a little skinny stack of Derek Carr, Darren Waller plus Denzel Mims. I think that's all viable. It's just that I don't know, the Jet side is a little hard to do much more than a single stack with, or a single run back to be specific.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. I do have more interest in this game than the last game we talked about, which is surprising because, man, the Jets, it's ugly, but I do think there's some good plays here. You mentioned him, Josh Jacobs. He is questionable if he does play. Just the game script alone, I like that a lot. They're going to be decent-sized favorites. They're going to be out ahead. They're going to run the ball a decent amount. The Jets' defense is very, very bad. And you kind of touched on the Derek Carr kind of Waller single stack. That's something you could definitely go to. I took a couple of shots of that last week, and Derek Carr had like 4.6 DraftKings points against the Atlanta Falcons. So, I mean, kind of concerning there, but I do think it'll be very, very low, and I don't think people are really going to go back to Derek Carr after they screwed him last week. And I think going back to Waller is something you can do as well because he does have that upside. I know he had a fantastic matchup last week against the Falcons, could not take advantage of it, but you get another great matchup here against the Jets. The target share is 100% there. 6,100. I do think it'll be a little bit lower owned than it was last week as well. So yeah, I might have some shares of the Carr and Waller stack running back with Mims. Other than that, maybe some Jacobs if he does play. I do like the game script from that. But yeah, kind of a game I do have some sneaky interest in for sure.
Yeah, I think it's an easy one to talk about. The plays are quite obvious. In the next one, plays are less obvious. There's one spot. It's the Houston Texans versus the Indianapolis Colts. A 51-point total has dropped 2 points, but still over 50 is quite nice. A 3.5 spread in favor of the Colts. On the Houston side, I mean, without Will Fuller, who is now serving the rest of his season on suspension, won't be playing. R.I.P. Will Fuller. You made me a lot of money. I'll miss you forever, son. But Brandon Cooks at, I believe, 5,600 was already almost splitting that wide receiver 1 role. Basically, since Bill O'Brien was fired, I think he had more targets than Will Fuller. Because he had more targets, he was essentially right up there in air yards with him. Now, no Will Fuller. Also, no Randall Cobb, who's on IR. Also, no Kenny Stills, who they released, I swear it was hours before we found out about the Will Fuller suspension. it's Brandon Cooks alpha season, and at 5,600, it's just an unfortunate pricing error by DraftKings. I think he's probably going to come in as the highest owned player on the main slate, or at least the highest owned receiver. Maybe the highest owned player. Maybe we'll see. But as far as receivers go, there's no better value this week. I think he's close to a lock in cash, unless construction maybe leads you elsewhere. Although I don't really think it would. It's probably a lock in cash. Deshaun Watson, cheaper than the other, most expensive quarterbacks. I think he'll be among the most popular. But man, like a 30% ownership rate for someone like Brandon Cooks, can we really stomach that? Is there a way to build unique Deshaun Watson, Brandon Cook stacks?
I don't know about unique, and I'm kind of curious to see what the Watson ownership's going to be for this week because people really don't like attacking this Colts defense. So I think that could lower it a little bit, but I definitely have some interest in the Houston stack here. Watson, Cooks, and I actually really like Kiki Cutie, who is going to be 3,500. So very very cheap there. Hasn't really done much this year, but yeah, like you said, it like with Will Fuller out, Kenny Stills out, Randall Cobb, like he's going to get a lot of run. And Watson's been very, very good this year, especially as of late. So it's kind of hard to get away from that Watson stack. It's just how do you get different? And like you mentioned, it's so hard to get different when Cooks is going to be so high owned there. So I'm definitely going to have some exposure. He's going to be high owned for a reason. I mean, 5,600, that's way too cheap. And you mentioned he was getting more targets than Fuller when Fuller was playing. I mean, imagine Will Fuller not playing and what that's going to do to Cooks there. So I'm definitely going to be looking at the stack. I just don't really know who to run it back with. T.Y. Hilton had a good game last week. Pittman's been solid. Not the best option in the world, but I don't know. Who do you think? Pittman, Hilton to run it back? Anybody?
I'm not doing this Hilton thing. He was still fourth on his team in targets last week. Pittman saw 9 targets. Hines saw, I believe, 10. Like, he got there. He finally had an efficient game, and it's something he used to be able to do at a pretty high clip. But now I think his quarterback doesn't really match his skill set very well. He's old. He's been suffering through injuries for years now. It just seems like the efficient games are going to be the outliers, and these terrible streaks of inefficiency are going to be the norm. So I'm not really betting on them. If he had gone out and did exactly the same thing he did, been even less efficient, but had done it like, it was 10 targets, that's what would be hopeful. Then I would be, oh, well, what if he spikes his efficiency on a 10 target game? Seems like those days are gone. So Pittman seeing 9 targets last week, I think, is the only real run back I'm interested in. Trey Burton's has posted a couple of like decent target games. I think he's only 3,500. At tight end, it's so dismal this week without Travis Kelce on the main slate. Mark Andrews was kind of coming back. He's not on the main slate. George Kittle is injured, so we probably won't see him again. It's really Darren Waller is a good tight end, and that's about it. So if I'm not playing Darren Waller, then I'm probably just looking to correlate my tight end play with the stack I'm doing. Personally, I'm not even going to go with the Deshaun Watson stacks. I think we're going to see probably 10 to 15% ownership on Watson, and almost all of those will be correlated with the Brandon Cooks. On the other side, Michael Pittman's probably not going to be unpopular either. So I think it's difficult just to build a unique lineup. I'll probably look elsewhere. I don't think it's bad. I think if you want to do it, go for it. I would say maybe the most unique way is if Jonathan Taylor returns. Do you have any interest in him as sort of the run back option?
Yeah, I don't hate it. 5,700, pretty cheap. Really good matchup. I just don't really like how they've used him so far this year. But he did have 22 carries in Week 11, so if he can get it like another 22 carries, of course, I'd be happy with that at 5,700. Just kind of hard to trust the Colts offense and Colts running game in general, honestly. But yeah, I think he's fine.
Next game we have is the game of the week, I think, based on just the overall games over under. It is Tennessee versus the Cleveland Browns. Browns are on the road. This game, Tennessee's implied team total of 29.75 is among, if not the highest on the main slate, a 53.5 point total. Browns are 5.5 point dogs. The weird thing about this game is that typically when we see totals 53, 54, 55, we've got teams that are these electric passing attacks, and now we have a total that is the highest of the slate, I believe, and neither team could give two craps about passing the football. They are both some of the most run-heavy teams in the NFL, and generally running backs in the same game, they actually do have, technically, they do have positive correlation. It's just that you could see the potential for their overall volume being capped. It's just not all that often. Like, you look at what Derrick Henry did last week, it came at the expense of the entire Indianapolis team playing from a deficit. Now, Nyheim Hines, as a pretty well-used pass-catching back, was able to get there. But he's not a traditional running back. A traditional running back is much less likely to get there when his opposing running back goes 35 carries, which Derrick Henry is the guy who would go for 35 carries. So I don't mind playing specific running backs in the same game. The Millie Maker had Derrick Henry and Nyheim Hines. I think that's perfectly fine. I think Austin Eckler is another type of running back. Like James Robinson actually is kind of pushing into this tier where his team just uses him so much, even if they're losing. It doesn't really matter. I don't know if I feel that way about this game. So because of that, I think I'm only looking to target one running back in this game, and for me, is Nick Chubb. I know they're the underdogs this week, but Cleveland, as long as they're within 7 points, have been running the ball on over 50%. It's actually 55% of their plays when they're within a touchdown. They don't care if they're losing by a field goal or not. They're fine with running the football. And they've done it so well that as long as they're not getting completely dusted, which Vegas doesn't have that happening, I'm fine with playing Nick Chubb. Comes back to 3 consecutive games of 100 yards, no fewer than 19 carries. And although I don't really think this is something that's going to stick, did see 3 targets and went over 30 yards last week. I don't think that's something you really expect from him. But hey, I guess that's the upside as well. I really just think that if the Browns are going to be even modestly competitive, as long as they're not losing by 10 or more points, they're going to run the football so much. Tennessee is a team that I think they're very beatable on the ground, and this game total looks great. So I'd rather play a Nick Chubb and run it back with a Corey Davis, run it back with an A.J. Brown, who's getting really expensive, but man, he is so incredibly efficient. He doesn't even need receptions to score. He scores on onside recovery touchdowns. So I think he's expensive, but I think if he correlates with my plays, I'm fine with it. Corey Davis as the cheaper of the two, and sometimes out-targeting, like a decent amount of times, out-targeting A.J. Brown is probably my favorite run back, but both are in play. What do you make of the split of both teams, having good implied team totals in a great game, but both teams are just so run-heavy?
Yeah, you're right. Both are very run heavy here, so it's going to be interesting. I do like it is that it is the highest total on the slate. And first we're going to talk about Nick Chubb. I mean, 7,700. The dude, a lot of people get scared away because Hunt's going to steal a lot of his carries, steal a lot of his playing time, but still, he's still getting it done. 144 yards in week 12, 114 in week 11, 126 in week 10. He's probably going to have another 100-yard game here. He's very cheap, 7,700 compared to guys like Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, and I do think he has that 100-yard upside here in this game in general against a pretty solid matchup against Tennessee. The one thing I would be worried about is, like you said, if Tennessee gets out too ahead, but I honestly don't really see that happening. So Chubb is like the only guy on the Browns I'm interested in. On the Tennessee side, I think you can attack it a couple different ways. Obviously, Derrick Henry sitting there 9,200. I think he's okay. I do think he's going to be very high owned. What I'm kind of looking at is maybe a Tannehill stack against this Browns defense, who I don't think the passing defense is great in general. And then taking away, I believe Ward is going to be out. So I think it's going to hurt them a ton, especially with Tennessee at home. I wouldn't mind a Tannehill stack, just getting away from the Derrick Henry ownership. Of course, great stacking options. A.J. Brown, 7,600. Like you mentioned, it's really expensive, but with no Ward, I really like that. I think he has a lot of upside there. Corey Davis, who's averaging 14.5 DraftKings points, 5,100. So yeah, I really do like the stack there. Wouldn't mind running it back with Chubb even. I still think, like you said, if it's close enough, they're still going to pound the ball at Chubb. Chubb's going to get his 100 yards, 1 or 2 touchdowns, 7,700. I like it a lot.
Yeah, in that 7K range, like you're looking at a Josh Jacobs, who I get it, he's favored, but really, do we think he is that much of a better play than Nick Chubb? No, I think they're in the same range of good plays, but we're going to see way lower ownership on Nick Chubb. And I agree, it's probably because people are afraid of Kareem Hunt, but the pie for them is so large. People don't understand just how much this team wants to run the football that sure, give Kareem Hunt 10 to 15 carries. That still probably leaves 15 or more carries for Nick Chubb, and he's been incredibly efficient. Leads the league in yards after contact per attempt. I mean, it's just when it's just math. It is literally just math. They run the ball enough that I don't care if he doesn't see the same amount of work on a, market share basis as James Robinson. I will live to fight another day with my, 19 carries, 115 yards, and a touchdown from Nick Chubb. Moving on, because I completely agree with you. I'm fine with Tannehill stacks. Overall, just the passing attack is the way Tennessee, I want to play my Tennessee stacks or Tennessee exposure. And then I run it back with Chubb. Moving on, Chicago versus Detroit, another game that the total is just so low that I don't really feel the need to get too much into it. Allen Robinson has had incredible market share, over 30%. It's 34% targets and 37% air yards in his 3 start and finish games with Mitchell Trubisky. Trubisky's not that much better or worse than Nick Foles. If you were playing Robinson with Nick Foles, you should probably continue to play him with Mitchell Trubisky. On the other side, if DeAndre Swift returns, which looks probable that he will return, I like him. He looked up to be on the precipice of a breakout. Outside of that, this game draws no interest from me.
Yeah, I mean it's tough because the Bears, Trubisky's not that great. I will give him this. He's really cheap at 5,400. The matchup's fantastic against Detroit. You really can't ask for a better matchup here. Allen Robinson, good stackable option. So yeah, I'm kind of hitting towards. I might have a Trubisky and Robinson stack. I'm not going to go crazy with it, but I do think it's fine just because of the prices of both guys and the matchup's fantastic. I think Montgomery is going to have some crazy ownership this week, and it's understandable in a way. I mean, I don't think he's that great, but Detroit's like dead last against the run, so I can kind of see why, but I probably not going there, especially if it's going to be chalky. And on the line side, really, I'm just interested in Swift. If Swift plays 6,500, you mentioned he's taken over the backfield, so yeah, especially against this Bears team, that's not that great. The defense is okay, but I still think he'll get a lot of run there. So Swift for me, I'm gonna have as ugly as it is, I'm going to have a Trubisky Robinson stack. Other than that, again, like it's an ugly game here.
Yeah, ugly game. Next game, less ugly. 48.5 point total. The Arizona Cardinals versus Los Angeles Rams. We have, I believe, it's Robert Woods at 59, Cooper Kupp at 61. Those prices, maybe I have them backwards, doesn't really matter. Those prices for the volume they're seeing just seems to be fairly low. My only concern is that with the Rams actually being favored in this game by 3 points, that spread has moved 2 points since opening as the Rams at 1 point favorites. They're a team that consistently, when they are winning football games, they choose to pound the rock, but the problem is, who do they pound it with? Last week, we saw Darrell Henderson see 10 carries, Cam Akers see 9. It was more than he saw the week before, but it still isn't really enough to get you excited about him. What do you make of the Rams offense specifically? Because I feel like when the Cardinals are firing on all cylinders, Kyler Murray runs the ball really well. He's a threat for the 100-yard bonus, and he passes DeAndre Hopkins a ton. Then if you want to get weird, we know Kenyon Drake's going to see a lot of carries. Christian Kirk has a decent A relative to DeAndre Hopkins. You can certainly make a pivot there. There's not too much wiggle room on this team. On the Rams, it is very much different because they have a three-headed backfield monster. They have two number one receivers essentially, and now Josh Reynolds kind of coming up in recent weeks with very good target totals. He leads the Rams in air yards over the past, I think it's about 6 weeks. He's a guy who I actually think is maybe the most interesting play on the Rams because we're going to see, I've got ownership projections that have Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods as two of the top 6 or 7 owned receivers on the slate. They need a decent amount of targets to get there, and their team is favored and want to run the football. That is their MOs. Whenever they're winning, Sean McVay chooses to run the football. You don't need 15 targets for someone like Josh Reynolds to get there. You need 6 because he has such a high ADOT relative to the rest of his team. I think he's probably the best leverage play. I still think at their prices, I'm perfectly fine with anyone, saying I'm just going to go on the straight and narrow, your Cooper Kupp, your Robert Woods, because they're cheap and it's a pretty good game environment.
Yeah, this is kind of tricky for me here. I just don't know about the Arizona offense right now. A lot of people are saying Kyler Murray is playing hurt, and maybe it is. I mean, it looked like he was playing hurt last game. 8.9 DraftKings points. Just so not typical from Kyler Murray there. And again, the Rams defense in general is pretty solid. So what I am concerned about is if the Rams do get out ahead, if Kyler Murray can't keep up, which is it's crazy to say, but maybe he is hurt. But if they do get out ahead, they're going to run the ball, and that's why I'm kind of concerned if I really want to stack this game with a Jared Goff stack there. But I don't know what I'm going to do yet. The ownership, like you mentioned, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are going to be extremely high owned, and for a good reason. On the good matchup, 6,100 for Kupp. 5,900 for Woods there, just way too cheap. I guess I'll probably have a stack or two with Jared Goff, just really easy stack to fit in. Jared Goff being 5,800, extremely cheap. Josh Reynolds, 4,200, like you mentioned. The dude's getting a lot of targets as of late. The matchup's good, but like I mentioned, the concern is they get out front and they run the ball with Cam Akers, Henderson, and Brown, and it's an ugly backfield, so I don't want to touch that. But I don't know what to do yet with this game, but it's very intriguing. I do think it's an intriguing game there.
I'll throw you another intriguing game. We have Seattle versus the New York Giants. I believe the spread right now is at 10, although I think that didn't even have a line when it opened because we weren't sure what was going to happen with Daniel Jones. Right now, the total at 46.5, depending on where you look. It's not a bad team total for this Seattle team. It's just north of 28 points. I mean, the stacking options are, as always, incredibly obvious, maybe more so this team than any other team. You play Russell Wilson, and you flip a coin, and you pick whichever one that lands on for DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Metcalf seems to be probably the better bet to score more points at this point. He's cleanly outpacing Tyler Lockett in terms of receiving yards, probably because he sees far more air yards. But he's also very expensive and Tyler Lockett is cheaper, so it requires less for Tyler Lockett to meet his like points per dollar threshold to win you a tournament. So because when you adjust for price, they're very similar plays. No strong preference between the two. I guess I'll still maybe pay up for DK Metcalf, but I'm just going to split my ownership between the two. I kind of like this. I mean, I think we're going to see Russell Wilson lower owned than he typically comes in at simply because this is an ugly game to stack because the run back options are so egregious. Like, you're going to be trying to figure out which guy Colt McCoy is going to throw to and if he can accurately get it to them. Do you have any lean on that?
Yeah, I don't know. You said Daniel Jones is questionable. You said you don't think he's going to play?
I do not believe so. I believe when the initial report came out, they said it looked like a multi-week injury. But if you talk about it, I'll see if we have any updates.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I kind of like this game from a Seattle side, but you mentioned it's going to be so hard to run it back. I mean, there's some options we can look at, of course. Evan Ingram at tight end, 4,900, had a really good game last week. But like you mentioned, like Colt McCoy's probably going to be throwing to him. So the low ownership in general, I do think it's going to be low owned, as do you. Russell Wilson, low ownership. I still think there's that upside. I don't think the Giants defense is all that great. And you mentioned it, flip a coin. DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett, one of them are going to go off. And if they're at like semi-low ownership, like that gives me a lot of interest there. So, yeah, something I'm definitely looking at. The only concern would be, again, like just like the last game. If the Seahawks get out ahead too much, they're just going to probably run the ball a lot. But mentioned efficiency earlier in the video. Russell Wilson is the efficiency master, so he doesn't really need like 40 passing attempts. He needs like 25, 30 to have a monster game, honestly. So, yep, give me a Russell Wilson stack. Probably, I do prefer Metcalf. I think Lockett's fine as well. And just the low ownership of them that I'm thinking in general has me intrigued there.
Absolutely, yeah. Daniel Jones right now did not practice as of Wednesday, and the initial report was that he was expected to miss, quote, sometime. So it doesn't seem like he's playing this week. I mean, I don't know. Daniel Jones wasn't that good anyways, and a lot of what he did was convert dropbacks into rush attempts. I don't think we'll see that from Colt McCoy. So maybe that's a thing you could spin as a positive for someone like Evan Ingram, who thrives on volume alone, essentially. He topped 100 yards last week for the first time this season. I don't hate him. Like I said earlier, I like correlating my tight end play with my quarterback, whether it be on the other side of the ball or, as their own quarterback, simply because I don't think I'm going to have good luck picking tight ends. Most of them are trash, but I do have at least a decent lean at picking good games and good quarterbacks. That correlates with the tight end, whether it be on the other side and it's a good game environment or your own quarterback. And if I pick the right quarterback who throws 3 touchdowns and 325 yards, if I play their tight end, I have a good chance at having found the good tight end of the week. And there's only like 3 good tight ends every week. So I think Evan Ingram has a decent chance to be one of those guys and is coming in super low owned because among the, 4 to 5K range, he's at the top of that 4K range. And he has been pretty bland this year. Last week was a little bit of change in that, and maybe it happens again this week. I think he's the best run back option. It's not the greatest run back option, though. I'm not sure. I think any interest in, I think Golden Tate, who saw 9 targets last week, or Sterling Shepard, who had a pretty consistent role up until last week.
Yeah, I say flip a coin on those Giants receivers. You really don't know, but Tate, 3,100, he's cheap. He's gonna get targets. I think it's fine, but yeah, not the best stacking option or run back option, but I do like that stack though.
The next game, Green Bay versus Philly. Oh, man, Philly. What a joke. Oh, man, the Eagles are 9-point dogs in this game. It's 47-point total. On the Packers side, there are really good plays. On the Packers side, I think Aaron Jones at, I believe, 7,200. I know, I get it. He split work with Jamal Williams, and the split has been a little bit more egregious in recent weeks to where you're paying 7,200 for what appears to be this near 50-50 back. Last week, I believe they perfectly split carries, like 17 apiece or something. They were also killing the Bears. And since the two have returned to the same field because Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones missed time in that mid to late part of the year, they have we've seen when the Packers are close, whether it be losing or winning within 7 points, Aaron Jones is still getting close to 2/3 of the backfield carries. That's all we've ever really expected from him. He's never going to be James Robinson, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook. If you tell me he's still getting the normal amount of work that he has gotten in the past 2 years, He's a massive favorite over the Philadelphia Eagles. His team has a good implied team total, and he could be leveraged off of the popular Josh Jacobs and Austin Eckler's in the same price range. I'm totally fine running the risk that, yes, they get up by 20 points versus the Eagles and Jamal Williams comes in. And if I haven't found my touchdown by then, I'm probably not going to find it. I'm fine taking that risk because if they get up by 20, there's a decent, it's not great, but a pretty solid chance that Aaron Jones was involved in getting them there. So I think Aaron Jones is one of the better running back leverage plays. Devontae Adams actually not drawing a ton of ownership. It's because he's expensive and this isn't a game people seem too keen to target. Anytime he comes in at modest ownership, I'm seeing like 15 to 20% range. I think I'm fine with it, even if he's expensive. I get the prices a lot, but playing him probably leads you to a different approach because Dalvin Cook, I think between him and Adams is going to be the more popular play. That gets you to a little bit of a different roster construction in general. So I like some Adams, but I really like Aaron Jones.
Yeah, Aaron Jones is definitely interesting. I mean, I always like when we get these stud running backs at low ownership, like last week. Derrick Henry was pretty low, and the dude went off. I think Aaron Jones has the ability to go off here, especially at 7,200. That seems really cheap. People are going to see that, yes, he's been splitting carries. I'm not overly concerned about that because he has a decent amount of touchdown upside, a decent amount of upside in general, a really high ceiling there. So, yeah, Jones is somebody you can definitely look at. What I'm kind of looking at is maybe a Rodgers to Adams stack. I know it's going to be different this week because you mentioned it. Adams is going to be, I mean, kind of lower owned from an Adams standpoint because people are going to go up and pay for your Cooks, pay for your Henry. So that intrigues me alone. That because I think Devontae Adams has a massive ceiling. I think it's going to be lower owned than usual, and I don't mind attacking this Philadelphia defense. So I was thinking like a Rodgers Adams stack, maybe a Rodgers Adams. Probably just Rodgers and Adams and run it back with like a Dallas Goedert. I know it's ugly, but Goddard is still getting a fair share of his fair share of receptions, fair share of targets there. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. But yeah, Jones, I like Adams a lot. I think he has a high ceiling. I don't care about the price. It allows you to get different from what everybody else is doing, which is going to be the Henrys, the Cooks. So I like that quite a bit. So yep, should be a good game here.
I love that Dallas Goedert run back. And then in his third game, I believe, it was like an ankle or knee injury, whatever. I don't really care because he looks healthy now, but he missed most of that game. Then he came back and saw one target. If you throw away the game he missed and his first game back, he leads his team in target share. He's like second or third in air yard share because out of all tight ends, his ADOT isn't actually that bad because he's mega athletic. So if you're getting a number one receiver at the tight end position at 4K, correlated or not, I'm going to have a ton of Dallas Goedert. So much Dallas Goedert because he's one of the only tight ends who I actually think has this solid, consistent role. Jonnu Smith, I don't believe, was targeted last week. Mike Gesicki went a whole stretch of the season where Durham Smythe was stealing work from him. Adam Shaheen was stealing work from him. Evan Ingram's quarterback is Colt freaking McCoy. I think of all the mid-priced tight ends, Dallas Goedert is the only one who I feel like I can accurately project to get a lot of his team's volume on a week-to-week basis. There are tight ends who I think on a single week can absolutely do that, but can they repeatably do it? I'm not sure. Dallas Goedert, I don't feel that way. I feel like we have a decent enough sample on him that even if I know like Zach Ertz, I think returned to practice or something, he was terrible to start the season, and Dallas Goedert was out producing him to start the season. Dallas Goedert is just a stud alpha tight end, and he's super cheap. So he's one of my favorite. He's my favorite tight end play. He's just one of my favorite overall plays. And he correlates well with things I like. I agree. You're going to get a very unique build by playing a Rodgers-Adams stack. I think you could probably throw like an Allen Lazard in there. I don't think that's too bad. He clearly separated himself last week as the number 2 receiver ahead of Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who I'm not sure if he saw a target. I know he didn't catch a pass. He may not have seen a target even. So number 2 receiver Allen Lazard isn't bad. I don't think you have to go there. He's not a guy who I think you're forced into double stacking because if, we see a big game from Devontae Adams, one of those good ones, 170 yards and 3 scores, no one else on this team has to go off. He can soak up enough of the volume. So I think a single stack of Rodgers Adams is fine. Run it back with Goddard, and you just, you jam that stack in and you play the chalk elsewhere. The next game, it's fine. It's the Chargers versus, Cam Newton and the Patriots. It's a 47 total. The reason I only say it's fine is not because I don't think Austin Eckler at just over 7K is egregiously priced. Like, we should be throwing him immediately into that Alvin Kamara tier from what we saw. 16 targets. He caught 11 of them, I believe, for 85 yards. I was all over him, and it paid big dividends. We should be throwing him into that 8K range because he is, half number 1 receiver, half number 1 running back. I think his price is bad, but everyone recognizes that. And in this game environment, I mean, Cam Newton doesn't do anything well except run the football at this point, and their receivers are terrible. So all they want to do is run Damian Harris, run Cam Newton, and use apparently James White as a goal line back. That's not great for the game environment. It's what we talked about with Taysom Hill. Is when your entire when your entire offensive philosophy is based on running the football, your games don't have great chances of hitting these massive overs. So I'm fine running the Charger side as one-offs aggressively with Keenan Allen, with Austin Eckler, even Hunter Henry is a good, not great tight end. Outside of that, I don't know. This game is so difficult to stack because of what the Patriots do. Not only the way they play with running the football, but also the receivers are just incredibly unpredictable week to week. And that's even if Cam Newton can get there. Like last week, I believe he was under 100 passing yards. That is, Kendall Hinton and Taysom Hill levels of non-production. So any interest in stacking this game, or are you just finding yourself in Chargers one-offs?
Yeah, probably just a Chargers one-off side. It's really hard to get excited about this Patriots offense. That it's really hard to play somebody. Last week, I actually did have James White. So funny you said that. I was kind of expecting to go out there, get some targets, get some receptions, but yeah, he got 2 touchdowns. So that was good in its own right, but that's not going to happen again. So literally have no interest from the Patriots side at all. So I'm not going to be stacking this game. It's going to be a one-off of Austin Eckler, and that's pretty much it. I think Keenan Allen's fine every single game. Probably not going to go there, but Austin Eckler, I was all over him last week as well. 6,100. He's now 7,100. It's still too cheap. Like you mentioned, the dude got 16 targets last week. Give me 10 targets, I'll be happy. But I do think he has that big target upside as a running back. He's going to get his carries. Had 25 total touches last week, some touchdown upside. So Eckler at 7,100. I love it. Way too cheap. Other than that, probably about it for me.
Yeah, we just need Ian Rappaport to tweet out again that Austin Eckler's going to come back to a limited role. Tell me, Rap Sheet, just one more time for my DK account. Please tweet out that he's not going to see a ton of work again this week after coming back to, I believe it was the most opportunities and maybe the most touches he had seen in an NFL game to this point in his career. And I don't think Rap knew at the time, or I don't think it was guaranteed that Kalen Ballage was out at that time. It didn't really matter. What a bad tweet, but it worked out. It kept his ownership in check, I would imagine, which was great for my DFS lineup. So, shout outs to Rap Sheet on that one, trying to help out my DK account. That's all the games in the main slate. So everyone, you can catch me on Twitter at Kyle Tweets here, Brady on Twitter at DFS_numbers. Go ahead and check out the site. We will have ownership projections up there at some point. Awesome content by both of us. And then you can check out Brady on the Sunday morning show to kind of break down all the news that will, I would imagine you were busy on this previous Sunday, recapping everything that happened from last week until next Sunday, or until Sunday of next week. So check him out on that Sunday morning show, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next week.